Hilton's Got Talks. Today, let's talk about the legend of Noah. Yeah, why not? There are hundreds of accounts all over the world of stories like Noah and different people that represented the person that built a boat or saved all the animals from flooding. And very similar stories leads credence that there was some kind of disaster that plagued the earth at one time or another. All the scientists say there technically wasn't enough water on the planet to flood the planet. And you're like, well, you know, different times of when men were still walking around, of course. The world's been here quite a while. But, and reinterpreting the original Hebrew from the Bible and other legends, you know, when they would say the entire world and everything with flesh would drown on the entire world, you're like, that's a pretty big ask. I mean, to flood the whole world, where'd all the water go? You know, it evaporated into our new atmosphere. Maybe people stopped living too long. Anyway, you got all these great stories, and probably in their world, they did flood and everyone died. The interpretation probably is a little loose to cover the whole world until we find some more scientific evidence for that. And when these stories, I mean, even in Hawaii, they had stories of people that rescued, you know, had certain stories, or the Polynesians, I mean, I believe they had stories. And all over the world, Russia, all over the world, everyone's got stories of somebody in North America. But there were no land bridges then connecting the two places. So if you destroyed all the animal life, how did animal life get from, you know, what would be the equivalent of the Middle East to North America, Hawaii, and all these places? They had their own stories. Maybe God interacted with all of them in his own way and said, build a boat and get all these animals on board. And similar types of stories where they rescued their land or rescued their farm animals and saved their community from, you know, so they could come back to it while everyone else got killed. Maybe it was one of those situations and started over like that. And everyone on the planet took their little turns rescuing their flooded world. And it could work like that. You know what I'm saying? Get it a little more scientific. Look for the translations. Really dig. It's like digging for the 7-day thing. There is an interpretation where it's a period of time, where it, from the time God, they imply a day, but they also imply from the time God finished, from the time he began. And other places in the Bible that was referenced to a period of time as opposed to a 24-hour day. And so it could be loosely interpreted that way. And it would probably be a better way to translate a Bible. And it would be cool to know those stories, to see all over the world. It's like a Benji Christmas special I saw when I was growing up. They had Benji meeting all the different kinds of Santa Clauses all over the world. And that was like the skinny ones, the fat ones, the Christmas Coca-Cola looking one, and then the one with the green coat instead of the red coat, and, you know, different ones like that. And they all had different names and different explanations why, you know, they didn't have to deliver the presents all on one day, because one, what was it, St. Peter? No, who is Santa Claus? Anyway, came in Europe and crossed the water in a little boat and delivered toys that day. So you skip that. Jewish kids didn't get Christmas toys, so skip that. And, you know, in the time zones, you know, you figure it's about midnight, somewhere around there. So he's zipping around the earth this way. Oh, time zone, Eastern Standard, just constantly back and forth, well, not around, back and forth, covering North and America on the East Coast. And then as he moves over, it's midnight there. You see, that's how he would do it. That wasn't in the special, that's my special. That's my great theory nobody ever tracks on. They show him flying all over the place in the movies. He's in Paris one day and in New York the next day, next second, and you're like, just stay in the time zone. Just weave back and forth, up and down, stay in that time zone. Keep that midnight buffer constantly. And as it starts to get it, lose midnight, you're in the next time zone, so it's midnight again. And you just zip, 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 zip. And in the oceans, you got plenty of time. There aren't too many deliveries there. And then you get over some parts of the land. The middle of the United States isn't that populated till you hit Texas and different places. You got a little Mexico, there's South America areas, they're thick. But you know, you go back and forth, and you get it all delivered. Good job, Santa. Same thing with Noah. We could have it a great story where all the different people from the different cultures were rescuing their people, and in their world, everyone dies, if that's the local legend. When Noah saves people of his world and the general area where everyone lives, all got flooded, and all those animals could come. And then in other worlds, in other areas of the planet, in North and South, you know, South Africa's different areas, they all have these legends of people, hey, I'm going to build a boat. I'm going to build a big boat. And of course, Noah's theoretically was the size of, like half the size of the Titanic. It was a big boat. It took a long time to build. But, you know, if everyone got heads up all over the planet, you know, there's going to be some flooding soon. It's going to affect this part of the world and this part of the world and this part of the world for about 40 days, 40 nights for Noah's area. And other places had it for different times. And eventually the whole world did kind of get flooded and got rescued by the certain people that God would have put into place to rescue their animals and their people and start things over a little bit. And that supposedly happened like 1,600 years after Adam. You know, he was already pissed off at all of us. What is he going to do to us, the rest of us? You know, we're not perfect. Oh, no. Now we got millions and millions of people everywhere, and millions of people in the other country everywhere. And all of us aren't perfect. And that's just, but supposedly they were real bad back in that day. So that really pissed him off. So like, share, subscribe if you think that would be a great story, a great reinterpretation of Noah, a new way of looking at Noah, and looking at the original text. Get some experts in and say, hey, could this be interpreted? Their world was the world they knew, that all this got flooded, everything they knew for miles and miles, and you know, just 100 miles, kilometers, or whatever covered their world, hundreds of kilometers got flooded. But because they probably lived near a river for life, you know, everyone had to have water. Maybe different communities, you know, just stories, and the floods would come and go, and sections of the earth could have gotten flooded by tsunamis and different things, certain things, earthquakes, meteor strikes, just different things that could have really wreaked havoc on the planet at different times and technically flooded the world. And then the experts could be like, well, yeah, there is some evidence of sediment here and sediment there, that at the top of, you know, during the Ice Age, they think there was sediment, you know, top of mountains have fossils on it that shows they got water. So, you know, they've got explanations for it all, but, you know, they're aquatic fossils at the top of mountains. So there was water there briefly at some point. So the story of Noah, whether we, you know, people are always looking for Noah's Ark, but I'm like, well, it's kind of made of wood. After like, you know, 6,000 years or 5,500 years or whatever it is, it might be gone, because, you know, I'm out here and I don't see any of the sticks that were laying around. They kind of get brittle and they're gone pretty quick. You know, wood evaporates, there's termites, it doesn't last that long. Certain wood, you know, and I'm sure it was great wood for building a boat and keeping it afloat and all that good stuff, but eventually, you know, even in the ocean, there's wasted ships that have sunk that are made of wood, and they're brittle, like half of them still exist, and that's only a couple hundred years. So who knows? But it leads some credence to the fact that other cultures had their own Noahs, that they had their own little stories of life. And, you know, if God had wiped out the entire planet, every flesh-breathing creature, because the fish were fine, and I would imagine a lot of the birds could have found that boat and dropped down on the top and gone We'll just eat fish. We're good. Just don't shoot us. Don't hunt us with a little sling or anything. But and they probably did. You know, they had to eat, but they probably fished. That was probably all they had to do. But and, you know, it's a big explanation. But you know, if the scientists are looking for an explanation, maybe that's it. Maybe they did have floods all over the world, just like they said, and it took place at different times. The water moved here, then it moved over there, and there were maybe a meteor shower caused tsunamis that hit this area, and then another one hit, and it hit this area and came back. There's explanations for it. There's explanations, because a lot of times the Bible stories feel like nice stories, parables to tell you and teach you to be a good person, and that's great. If you believe that, if you believe it's every word is every word, great. But it's hard to go in to justify what their version of 7 days was back in the day, or 6 days, I think the day of rest. Some experts say, well, technically he's still resting. You know, the seventh day is a continuous day. There you go, a long period of time. You know, if that's the way it is, there's your long period of time. So, you know, you're looking at what you've got written down for you, but there's so many different versions of the Bible out. You know, just because you grew up with King James Version, you know, your great-grandparents may have grown up with a different version. And if they couldn't read, they were told what was in the Bible, the Latin. It's translated from Hebrew, and as best they could, you know, if it said world or day, that sounded good to them. That was the general, you know, consent of what they meant. But back in the day they wrote it, or the day that the oral history was done, it may have been a much more limited vocabulary, and it could have implied, because there were other writings of other stuff, and you compare them and say, could this have been a period of time instead of a day? And have a Bible that's written a little more logical for people that are like skeptics. You know, 7 days? Well, it could also be period of time, okay? Put that in there, periods of time. How's that sound? That sounds more scientific. In fact, if you asked a scientist how many periods of time did it take to create the universe, they would sit there and think, and they might just say 7, 8 periods of time. You know, the Earth was a big bang, we got this formation, you know, because there are things in the Bible talking at the end times where the stars fall out of the sky. You're like, okay, the stars are not all stars. Some of them are planets, some of them are galaxies, just different phenomena that we don't, you know, you just look up and see a dot of light, doesn't mean it's a star. Technically, it could be a galaxy, a nova, anything, you know, and they're not going to fall out of the sky unless there's something going on with the atmosphere to create the illusion they are in a falling state, but it's really the atmosphere messed up. Or basically a meteor shower comes, you know, end of times could be a meteor hit, and all the raining fire from the meteor would be called stars falling out of the sky. See, a different interpretation, and that would make sense, because the stars in galaxies 100 million light years away aren't going to just disappear all at the exact same time, most likely. Unless we're watching Project Hail Mary. There's a good movie coming up. That was a great book. Great book. You got to get it. So, guy that wrote The Martian wrote that book. Great. He loves playing with science and getting science as close to possible, in reality as possible, for the story. And it's always neat when they are able to combine that. I like James Rollins' books. He loves combining mythology, religion, fact, everything into a story to create a compulsive narrative, kind of like Dan Brown does with those Da Vinci Code type books. He's great. He's a great author. And he combines a little bit of what could be, what is, based on fact. And he said the last book, The Secret of Secrets, most of it's based on fact, scientific evidence. And I was like, wow, it was a good book. And Robert Langdon in the book is 50, because it's been a long time since he wrote a Robert Langdon book. And Tom Hanks, I checked, it was like 60. And I was like, close enough, do another movie. You know, great books, great book, great movies. You know, call Ron Howard, tell him he's got a movie he's got to make real quick, while Tom's still young enough to make it. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think it would be interesting to see the world of Noah's combined in a story, or a clarification that these events a book of Noah, and we could read about all the different Noahs around the world and what their story was and how similar it was to the biblical Noah, and other places where it wasn't as similar, but it was still their legend, their guy that took his family and saved the area, saved some animals in his own little way when the floods came. All right, so if you agree, like, share, and subscribe. If you're an author, there's a book. There's always a good book idea. You know, James Rollins is sitting there going, Noah book. He could have done something like it already. You know, and Dan Brown getting motivated. Do another book. He's only got like 8 books out, you know, total. And he's a great author. And you're like, do another book. Do a Noah book where because Robert Langdon has the photographic memory, like Sheldon on Big Bang Theory. He's got the photographic memory. So he would know probably all those stories for the most part and be able to compare them as the mystery unfolded. You know, that would be cool. So just getting back on the bike, heading back, going a nice ride out here, Bridgewater Park retirement area. I like their chairs and water fountains. It's nice. We'll all be here one day. All right, right, one of these days. But I'm about halfway home, so I want to get back to it. And we'll talk about Noah and all the different Noahs. The whole planet's had Noahs and have rescued animals from floods. So I'd like to hear it on the comments. What you think? All right.